So we had a comment on the Sage Hill video that we did, I think the second video. Um, his his response here, his name is Jack Turner 44917, was, "This guy's great. I admire his passion for his work. The biggest problem with small regenerative type farms is plastic. It's everywhere, and the amount of microplastics in the soil is disturbing. This guy is peppering his soil with microplastics, and it's not a horrible way to. It's not only a horrible way to farm; it's not ecologically sustainable." Thought that was an interesting comment because my gut reaction to that was, yeah, why aren't we using cotton textiles and that kind of thing? There's natural stuff that you can use, but do we have it at the sizes that we need? Is it even readily available? I mean,
Yeah, I think this comment's a great one, and I've questioned it myself. Or why are we using all these plastics? Is there an industrial or another material that we can use that's just as strong and function just like plastic does, but lasts longer?
yeah, plastic is just a really big problem that I think our society is facing because of the introduction of it. Was it in the 50s and 60s or even sooner?
Yeah, World War II.
Our economy is pretty much wrapped up in it, and what to do with bags, what to do with bottles. I mean, a lot of things end up in our clothes that they kind of weave into it.
Yep.
So we went from
It's everywhere.
100% cotton to these polyester mixes and whatever else that they
Yep.
call them. They have lots of different names.
So it's a big social, economic, global issue that we're
Right.
trying to wrap our hands around. But I think this is another example, though, of how regenerative farming is trying to tackle it.
So what is regenerative farming doing to tackle this? And actually, when we look at Sage Hill, like, what were they actually using there? I can remember the ground cover, that black ground cover that he was using, and I can remember the netting he was using over certain things. That was like a white netting, and then also probably
The hoop house.
the hoop house had
Yeah.
some sort of covering over that. So
Yeah, so Sage Hill, when I first met him about 3 years ago, he was using a lot more of the netting, covering all of his crops with it because he thought that was the best solution for pest control. So he was covering everything, and he's been scaling back ever since because he's found that if you allow nature to do its job on your farm, you don't need it as much.
Right. And
So
I think while we were there, we started to see the birds swooping in to kind of do their job, right?
yeah, exactly. As you allow nature, you invite nature into your farm, and you allow it to do what it's supposed to do, that it will do the job of the netting. And
Yeah.
he's been scaling back ever since. He's using a minuscule amount he used to use years ago. So also on the ground cover, he was using what we call a geotextile. It's a industrial plastic that is meant to survive 20 to 50 years. Although that's been borrowed from the construction industry, we usually use that hidden from UV radiation, so nobody really knows at this point how long it's going to last. But it's definitely not a disposable plastic.
Okay. Yeah, because I think what I saw there was some of it was exposed to the sun, and there was other ones that was used in the hoop house,
the
which
hoop
was a little
house,
bit
yeah.
more covered from direct UV radiation.
Yeah, it's a ground cover that is used that is permeable, which means water will pass through it, and it will stabilize the soil and limit erosion. It's a woven or a non-woven fabric, and it's super strong, and we use it underneath asphalt and roadway construction. We use it in grading operations and all sorts of stuff like that. So it's definitely a step in the right direction of as an industrial plastic and not a disposable, but we'll see. But there's movements beyond that to get rid of that altogether and using natural materials as your ground cover, like a coconut fiber mats, instead of using the non-woven or woven industrial plastic mats even.
Okay. So that's as it applies to farming. Other areas and industries that you just mentioned, like when we're talking about roadways, it's still being used there. We've got a lot of problems to deal with when it comes to petroleum products such as plastics and tires.
Yes,
and what to do
that's
with
a
that.
whole nother
So
discussion.
that's getting outside of the scope of this particular video, where we wanted to cover what's happening in the agriculture
Yeah.
industry.
So we got this comment, and we both had an initial reaction, but we really started to think about this, both of us separately,
Yeah.
and then we came together. And I spent just 15 minutes reading online, and there's a whole rabbit hole of information. Industrial ag, if that is what the commenter was referring to as the more conventional solution to agriculture, is one of the largest consumers of plastic materials in the world.
Oh,
And
okay.
and I actually I found the report, and it lists here all sorts of uses for plastic: mulch films, tunnels in greenhouses, irrigation tubing, bags and sacks, silage films, bottles, coatings on fertilizers, pesticides, and seeds. That one threw me for a loop. Non-woven protective textiles or fleece, fruit protectors, plant protectors, nets, ropes, lines, traps, and enclosures. So regenerative agriculture gets rid of the coatings on fertilizers, pesticides, and seeds, because you cannot use those at all. And if you don't have fertilizers, pesticides, you need very few bottles. The non-woven protective textiles is something that they use, and we already discussed that. And the bags and sacks, yeah, there's a lot of opportunity here for a growth in what could be a huge revolution in plastics in agriculture.